Should you buy a used BMW i3 in June 2023? This is a new format I'm going to try out just to see how it goes. Videos I've done in the past where I look at the sort of broad used EV market have always been quite popular, so I think we're going to try some model specific snapshots at the market in a given period of time to help show some of the deals that are out there. There's been a lot of change in the used EV market recently. There's been a lot of talk of prices falling, and there's been a bit of doom and gloom about part exchange values and what have you. But I think it's a really, really good time to hone in on some of the bargains that are out there. The EV used market is extremely attractive if you're a buyer right now, I would say. Not so much for dealers who are probably hurting a little bit. The value of some of their stock might have fallen recently. Used cars being worth less than new ones isn't particularly shocking. I don't think anybody is surprised that a second-hand car costs a bit less than a new one. So once the dealers get over themselves and realise that depreciation is now a thing again, there's some real bargains out there. The BMW i3 came to market in 2013 and production ended in 2022. The styling's not to everybody's taste. In fact, some people have some quite strong opinions on it, as they tend to do with anything that's a little bit daring, a little bit different. But if you ask me, it's far more appealing than the sort of trend BMW have now for having a massive grille and then putting some wheels on it and calling it a car. But the i3 is more than just some outlandish styling. It has some real innovation. It has a carbon fibre shell, composite body panels, and uses recycled materials throughout the interior. And if you ask me, it feels a bit less BMW than perhaps an equivalent like 1 Series or 3 Series. Just a little bit lighter, and it takes itself a little bit less seriously. But that's not to say that it's a bad quality car and that the quality is different. If anything, it's every bit sort of BMW quality. It just has a bit of a different character to your standard offering, if you ask me. And for a lot of people, I think that was part of the appeal. They liked the fact that it was a little bit different, a little bit out there, and I think that had a strong appeal, at least to some of those early adopters who were buying EVs back when things were a lot different to they are today. Full disclosure, for those of you who don't know, I do own a BMW i3. I bought a brand new one towards the end of 2021. It was one of the last build slots that was available. They did a few in 2022, but it was very much winding down. And that's the second i3 we've had in the household. I had an i3 range extender with a little 60 amp hour battery, and we'll get to the model range in a moment. To start out with, and loved it so much that we bought a brand new one with the big battery. And like I say, we'll cover what's what in terms of models shortly. Very clever car. Always found it, personally think it makes an incredible use of the space that is available. It looks relatively small. It's not really a small car when you look at the dimensions. It's actually a little bit bigger than you might think. But step inside and it feels a little bit like a TARDIS. It makes incredible use of space, but it's of course because it was a ground up EV design. You don't have transmission tunnel or anything like that. Completely flat floor and makes really, really good use of the space. I've seen photos of other owners putting ridiculously large things in the back of their i3s with the seats folded down, washing machines, stuff like that. Things that, you know, cars of this sort of shape and size you wouldn't expect necessarily to be able to transport, but it's an incredibly useful, versatile little car. And it's not just a city car. I think because it is a little bit smaller, people assume that it's just this, you know, crappy little city car. And I don't think that's the case. I've done long journeys in our i3. Very, very capable thing. So the models then, you'll have 3 choices of battery, which are broadly linked to age. So as time went on, the batteries got bigger. And that'll be, for some reason, BMW labelled these in amp hours. So you've got 60 amp hour, 94 amp hour, and 120 amp hour. But in real money, that's about 22 kilowatt hours, 33 kilowatt hours, and 42 kilowatt hours. Battery degradation, I don't think you need to worry too much about the i3. It has incredibly good battery management, and there's enough of a buffer there in terms of the battery capacity that I'm struggling to believe that you'll see one with any real degree of degradation. Very, very good at managing their battery. I know of several people with high mileage ones that they go just about pretty much as far as they did when they were new. It has proper battery cooling, all that stuff. So in terms of, what about an older one? Will the battery still be any good? Broadly, the answer is yes, absolutely. There's a range extender option on the 60 amp hour and the 94 amp hour models. That was discontinued when the big battery was launched. And in terms of charging, they will all charge at 50 kilowatts on a DC charger if they have CCS or DC charge preparation. This was only an issue on the very early 60 amp hour cars that the CCS charging was an optional extra. So if you're buying one of the early cars, make sure that it has the 2 pins below the AC connector for DC charging. If it doesn't have that, you want to really think about whether you're going to have to charge this thing when you're out and about, because you'll be stuck with just 7 kilowatt AC charging. I have seen a handful of them around. I think some local authorities bought them, probably because they were only charging them overnight at an office and they were never ever having to be rapid charged. But it's worth just keeping an eye out for. They're pretty rare, but just make sure you don't get lumbered with one if you're going to have to need to rapid charge this thing, which most people will. So the range extender then, that is a 650cc engine from a BMW motorbike that is stashed underneath the boot floor. And it only ever is used to charge the battery. So we're not talking about like a typical plug-in hybrid here where you can either use the engine or use the electric. This is a dedicated little engine that when the battery is running low can kick in and can charge the battery to keep you moving. It will come in automatically if you let the battery drop down really low, or whenever you're below 75%, you can press a button that says maintain state of charge, the engine will kick in and it will keep the battery from depleting. And that drastically increases your range. It means that as long as you keep the little 9 litre petrol tank topped up with petrol, it will keep going. Now, one caveat there is if you're driving very fast for extended periods of time, the state of charge will drop. Now, as long as you keep your speed down a little bit, that's fine. You can carry on basically until the petrol tank is empty. But if you're doing sort of upwards of 70, 75, 80 mile an hour on the motorway, you're going to find your battery is dropping even though the engine is running. So it's worth bearing in mind. But on the whole, the range extender does mean you can drive for extended periods of time without having to charge. Your needs will dictate whether you actually need the range extender. And you need to think about this because it does add complexity. Most complaints I've seen from i3 owners of issues with reliability relate to the range extender engine. That's not to say it's unreliable, it's just some of the common faults relate to the components associated with the range extender. So if you don't need it, there's no point in having it. There's not really a price premium anymore though on the used market. Obviously there was when it was new, this was a paid option, you have to pay extra for this. On the used market, there's so many of them around, it doesn't really command a premium. So it really is up to you. It's not going to be a, oh well, it costs more to have the range extender. You can really just take your pick depending on your needs. So let's start with the 60 amp hour car then. This is the older ones with the small battery. Pretty much everything at the bottom end of the market is going to be this. It's going to be the small battery. The cheapest i3 I could find in the country is this one. And this is a range extender with a 60 amp hour battery for $6,995, which seems like incredible value. Now, it has 150,000 miles on the clock, so it's been around a bit. But let's be honest, it's probably not the worst idea ever. You want to prepare yourself, because the i3 can be a little bit expensive if it does go wrong. But there are plenty of Hefra garages out there that can fix them for a lot less than a BMW main dealer. So you're not tied to paying stupendous amounts of labour to BMW just because something's gone wrong. One thing that heads up is if the air conditioning doesn't blow cold, you should probably find another one. And the reason for that is the air conditioning is actually linked to the battery cooling system and it can stop working, and the only warning you have is that the aircon isn't cold, but then it means that the battery cooling efficiency isn't as good as it should be, but there's little warning of that. So it's quite common, right? Second-hand old cars that have done some miles, or the aircon doesn't work, oh well, I don't really care, it doesn't matter, I just won't use it, I'll open the window. I would say with the i3, you don't want to take that approach. So on early, high mileage cars like this, still make sure the aircon works. Now, if bottom of the market life isn't for you, and let's be honest, it's not for everyone, £9,000 gets you a better, lower mileage car, and it probably is where the sensible people will start. Now, I would buy that $6,995 one all day long, just because it's just what I do. I'll buy the worst example of a car out there for the least amount of money, and probably regret it. But if you've got £9,000, you can get yourself a really clean and tidy 60 amp hour range extender, which probably knocking on the door of 100,000 miles, but all in all, I'd say quite a lot of car for the money. The battery only versions, so losing the range extender, are a bit rarer, but they're also usually much lower mileage. Obviously, right? If it can't go as far because you've got to charge it all the time, it's not going to have covered as many miles. This one is under 10 grand and it only has 18,000 miles on the clock. So, I mean, it's box fresh, isn't it? If you can afford the little bit extra, the 94 amp hour car and its increased range is probably worth the money. They start at around 10 grand for leggy ones, but this 94 amp hour range extender with just 40,000 miles on the clock is available for £11,000, and I think that is stonking value. I'd argue that this is the best combination for an i3. You've got more usable electric range, but you've also got that range extender backup should you need it. If you've got the budget to move up to the 120 amp hour, and these will be the newer cars with the biggest range, and this is what I've got at the moment. 160 mile range in the summer all day long. It'll probably actually do a little bit more if the weather's really nice. And I found even the dead of winter, it could be -3 outside, it'll crack out 120 miles, no problem. I've used ours to do my stupid 110 mile each way commute, and it was absolutely fine for it. There was no worries about range at all. Although you don't have the range extender option with this, it is only available battery only. You don't need to worry about the CCS thing because it was standard by now. It was even standard for the 94 amp hour. I find I just don't really worry about range with it. The guessometer is really good at telling you how many miles it's going to go on charge, and as long as you plan charging stops, I found it absolutely fine, and I don't miss the range extender over the one that we had previously. This i3S at under 14 grand looks like an absolute bargain to me. Now the S adds firmer suspension, wider wheels, and it has like a sports drive mode. So, you know, if you're interested in going a bit quicker, it is the one to have. I've never driven one, but I'm told it handles much better. It is the one to have if driving fast is what you're about. This one's done nearly 80,000 miles, so it's been quite busy. But I think at under 14 grand, it's an absolute bargain. But even if you want the standard spec i3, if the S stuff doesn't interest you, this one at just over £14,000. I mean, it's stupendous value for money. They were over 30 grand new. It's got less than 40,000 miles on the clock, and it can be yours for just over 14 grand. I think that is an absolute stonking bargain. And apart from the one at 7 grand that sort of turns my eye, I think if you had the budget, if 14 grand was achievable, this one would be the one to buy. If you're ready to go full battery electric, leave the range extender behind, I do think these later cars with the bigger battery are the way to go. So that is a quick rundown of the BMW i3 on the used market in June 2023. I think the range offers something for everyone, really. From those bottom of the market high mileage cars to, I mean, the really quite sensible, low mileage, really tidy, standard 120 amp hour i3. There's something for everyone here. They're great fun to drive, and I think this is something that's often overlooked. You're not going to have anywhere near as much fun driving a Leaf or a Zoe as you are in an i3. They are just fantastic cars to drive. And that is the one place where you know it's a BMW, because the way they handle, the way they drive is superb. They do have BMW running costs. There's no getting away from that, but plan a contingency and either get to know who your local Hevra garage is, so independent specialists that can look after it, or take a warranty. You can get even the BMW official insured warranty if you want to be tied to the main dealer network. Can be a way to go, just to make sure that if something does go wrong, you're covered. Otherwise, put a little bit of money away, find out who a reliable independent specialist is, and that is you sorted for maintenance. They don't need a huge amount to keep them on the road. Yeah, there is a service plan, you know, change the brake fluid, all that kind of stuff. But on the whole, fairly good. It's just when something does go wrong, it does tend to be a little bit pricey. But it's a lot of car for the money, especially at the moment. And bearing in mind, you're buying these at such a low price versus what they cost new, that you can maybe afford to spend a little bit on maintenance. Just be aware that trying to run one on a shoestring might not be the best idea. So let me know what you think in the comments. Would any of these i3s that I've featured here be catching your attention? What would you prefer instead if you had a 7 grand, 10 grand, 15 grand budget? Is there something that stands out that you say, well, actually, no, I wouldn't bother with the i3, I'd have this instead? Let me know. And also let me know if you find these style of videos helpful and if you want to see more of them. Nothing is better than your feedback on what works and what doesn't, but I do hope that this is useful for you to wade through what's out there on the used market. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.